We're very pleased to have Dr. Anne Speckhard speak for us today. She's director of the International Center for the Study of Violent Extremism, and you've served in Georgetown University as a psychiatrist and as within the Center for Security Studies. And above all, you've interviewed many, over 800 terrorists, violent extremists and their family members, and you've come with some proposals to try to understand the whys of terrorism, and also try to find a way to rehabilitate them once they're ex-terrorists. And so I'm very eager to listen to your talk. And well, the floor is yours now. And thanks a lot, Anne.
Okay, thank you, Marc-Andre, for inviting me, and Ina for facilitating the advertisement for this. I'm so sorry that there's background noise. I'm in a hotel in Prague, and usually this spot is very, very quiet. But crazy. Hopefully they'll go away. But my talk is on psychosocial aspects of radicalization into white supremacy, anti-government militia, incel and militant jihadist movements and groups. And I'm very happy to take part in your conference. I've been a fan and published in your journal in the past. Let's see now. Oh, I'm trying to advance and it's not advancing. Let me see. I think, hold on one second. Okay, oh, here we go. Okay, so I've spent the last 20 years talking and listening to terrorists. I'm a psychologist, a research psychologist, and I did serve in the psychiatry department at Georgetown for over 20 years. I'm now a retired adjunct professor, but I spent 20 years listening and talking to terrorists and violent extremists to try to understand their trajectories into and back out of terrorism. So this is me in Syria when I was going in and out of Syria practically every third month to talk to ISIS members. And here's some of the books that I've written about my interviews with terrorists. I guess I should say what's there. I have interviewed over 800 terrorists and violent extremists. 275 of them were ISIS, 16 al-Shabaab, 54 white supremacists and anti-government militia members, and I got lucky and talked to 6 Antifa violent extremists. Antifa don't like to give interviews, but I guess all of these people are reticent to speak to people like us. And in all of my interviews, I take a psychosocial history. So I go back to their childhood, ask about school and family, and how they got interested in the group that they ultimately joined, what their experiences were in the group, who recruited them, how they were recruited, whether it was internet-based or face-to-face, what their experiences and roles in the group were. And since most of them are disillusioned, some of them de-radicalized, ask them about that process. So following the process of radicalization and de-radicalization. And what I would have to say about our center, we call it by its acronym ICSVE, we're an action-based research center. So we don't want to be pie in the sky. We want our research to be almost immediately useful to policymakers and to people that are trying to prevent and intervene in terrorism and violent extremism. For that reason, I was studying terrorism for about 20 years. We stood up our center in 2015-16, and that was with State Department request and funding to go out and try to interview anybody in the jihadist movement that could speak against ISIS. And at that time, I said, it's got to be ISIS. You can't use some other group because they don't listen to other groups. They are convinced that they're the one and only true Islam. But I told State Department, I don't know if I can get interviews with any of these guys. I myself might end up in a video. And it was the first time that I videotaped interviews because, you know, coming from, well, I think all of us have had this transition that we've gotten a lot more used to cameras and to technology. But I was a treating clinician for 20 years, and I did a lot of research where it was paper and pencil, and I wrote notes. They were in-depth interviews also, but I never recorded. So this is the first time I recorded with ISIS interviews and Al-Shabaab and later with the white supremacists. And I found that people weren't averse to the camera. They were worried about it at first. They were worried that I was a journalist and that I was just looking for a sensational headline. But when they saw that wasn't the case, they were interested. Maybe I can ask these people behind me to move. Just 1 second. Is there any chance you can move? Because I'm at a meeting. It's okay. I just want it quiet. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that's okay. Sorry about that. So one of the things that we did, all my interviews are about an hour and a half, 2 hours long, and they're video recorded. So we ended up making them into, with the permission of the person that was interviewed, into short counter narratives. And at the end of my talk, I'm going to show you one of them. But it was basically a story arc of this person had a grievance, started resonating to a terrorist ideology and a terrorist group, and felt that the terrorist group was providing an answer to their grievance. And then they went down the rabbit hole and joined the group and whatever their experiences were, and then talked about what the group was really about and how they got used and how they got disillusioned and maybe even de-radicalized. And we made 300 counter-narrative videos. We call them Escape Hate and Breaking the ISIS Brand. Escape Hate addresses hate movements, and Breaking the ISIS Brand addresses ISIS. We also did this for Al-Shabaab. And Facebook partnered with us, which was fun, and they gave us a lot of ad credits. So we were able to get our counter-narrative videos out to millions of people, and Facebook helped us to identify people that would be vulnerable to ISIS and white supremacist content. And we made all of our videos. You'll see this. Well, you won't see the whole thing because it doesn't show when you just show a video. But if you go to our YouTube channel, you can see that all of our videos have really disgusting titles and really disgusting thumbnails. And the reason we do that is we want the people that are watching ISIS content, white supremacist recruiting videos, to also watch ours. And we want ours to be paired in the algorithms with theirs, so that there's a chance that we're reaching the people that really need to be reached. Because we don't care if you watch our videos, we care if somebody going into ISIS, somebody going into KKK, Proud Boys watches our videos. And we did over 200 Facebook campaigns for prevention, which is where we actually promoted them with ad credits on people's feed. I also designed the psychological and Islamic challenge parts of the detainee rehabilitation program, and have been involved in rehabilitation efforts around the world with different countries. And I consult regularly to Balkans, EU, US agencies, and globally on terrorism prevention, repatriation, rehabilitation, and reintegration issues. And we also talk on gender consulting, we do police training. So these are some of our publications. And you can go to our website. Our ethos is to give everything away for free. The books aren't free, but everything else, it's free on our website. So I think we have to start right away with radicalization to violent extremism. We have to acknowledge that radicalization is outside of societal norms. Probably a lot of you are radicals, and you probably want to institute fundamental changes in society, and that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. We got feminism as a result of that. We've got civil rights as a result of that. But radicalization to violent extremism or to terrorism is the real issue that we're talking about. And that usually involves taking on an ideology that attempts to address grievances and institute social and political change by engaging in violent action, including terrorism. So somebody being radicalized, we don't have to worry too much, but if they start adapting violence as the answer, then we need to worry. And everyone always criticizes if I don't define terrorism and violent extremism. So I'm going to tell you there's 500 definitions of terrorism. The UN has never been able to agree on just one, but the definition that we use is terrorists are politically motivated non-state actors who use violence against civilians and property to instill widespread fear while trying to achieve a political goal. So it's political and it's non-state. And a domestic violent extremist, I took the FBI and Department of Homeland Security's definition, which is defined as an individual based and operating primarily within the US, but it doesn't have to be, or its territories, without direction or inspiration from a foreign terrorist group or other foreign power. And again, just seeking to further political or social goals, wholly in part through unlawful acts of force or violence dangerous to human life. So what causes radicalization? When 9/11 happened, a lot of us asked this question: are violent extremists crazy? Are terrorists crazy? Why do they hate us? And there's a lot of answers to that. We also asked, are they mad or are they bad? And this book, Talking to Terrorists, I wrote after speaking to 400 terrorists. I had gone through West Bank and Gaza, had been in Iraq, talking to Al-Qaeda, talking to some Al-Qaeda in Europe, and a lot of the Palestinian groups, and had been to Casablanca, and in that case, to talk to friends of their already dead suicide terrorists. And what I really realized is that the locus of control for what makes a terrorist doesn't reside only within the person. It's psychosocial, and we need a systems approach. And moreover, we have to acknowledge no one's born a terrorist. People become terrorists by the forces that act in their lives. And I think with this group, we're probably all systems theorists and understand that. So when we talk about terrorism, we talk about the lethal cocktail of terrorism, and that was my model. There's different models of terrorism: staircase, pyramid. I like to think and make a little fun that I made a cocktail, but there's 4 things that are necessary and sufficient that I learned from 800 interviews of terrorists, and that's that you need a group, you need an ideology, you need some level of social support, and then all of this has to resonate with the individual motivations and vulnerabilities on the individual level. So the group, that it can be the Proud Boys, it can be the Oath Keepers, it can be the KKK, it can be ISIS, it can be abortion clinic terrorists, it can be incels. But the group is what provides a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose, dignity, brotherhood in many cases, sisterhood. They define the grievance, they develop the ideology and the answer to the grievance. They provide targets, they provide the means to target, and the acts of violence which are acceptable and those which are not. If we think about it, there's very few terrorists that have acted without a group. So we know Ted Kaczynski, who was a PhD in math, figured out how to make bombs himself. He was the Unabomber. And he wrote his own manifesto. But we're talking about a really smart guy here that doesn't need a group to enable him. This is also Chris Dorner. He was an LAPD sniper terrorist, and he was upset with what he viewed as racism in the police force. But he was trained by the military and by the police force. So becoming a sniper, he already was one. He wrote a manifesto. It was kind of a stupid one. But very rarely do you see people acting alone. We do talk about lone wolves, but lone wolves are influenced by groups. They're following ideologies, usually that they found over the internet. And they may act alone, but they're definitely acting to a virtual audience. And the audience is usually really important to them. And they want a sense of belonging with a movement, a group, and they're following its ideology. So let's talk about ideology. Every military knows that to train people to kill, you have to convince them that it's correct to kill, because human beings don't generally want to kill, especially people that they might view as innocent. So in the military, a lot of times it's trained by cohesion. So you want to keep the guy on your left and the guy on your right alive, and therefore don't shoot over the enemy's head, shoot at the enemy. You dehumanize the enemy, and you do a lot of training to get people to a place where they can use violence against other human beings. And terrorist groups are no different in this regard. Usually their ideology is defensive. So they'll be saying, if they're abortion clinic terrorists, that we have to, there's a Holocaust of babies, and you have to stand up for human life, and therefore you can kill the doctors that are killing babies. If it's an environmentalist terrorist, the environment's going to hell, you have to save the earth, and you're going to have to use violence to do it. If it's ISIS, Al Qaeda, Al Shabaab, a militant jihadist, they're going to say Islam is under attack, Muslims are under attack. It's usually the West that's seen as the enemy. And so you have to strike at the enemy, and you have to defend Muslims, the Muslim Ummah. Of course, in that case, religion is really woven into it. If it's white supremacist, they'll be saying things like white replacement, white genocide. You have to fight for your race and make sure that it survives, and for your place in society. So terrorist ideologies justify violence in pursuit of their cause, usually by being defensive. And they identify a culprit that they can blame for the grievance, and they state that violence against the culprit is acceptable if not necessary. And sometimes it's simply externalizing and projecting one's own problems onto others. And other times there are real grievances, but a lot of us would argue that terrorist violence isn't appropriate as a solution. Social support is also a necessary ingredient to this lethal cocktail of terrorism. And I think the best way to think about that is that we have this whole phenomenon of social mirroring. We look at other people to see what's appropriate. So, people dressed a certain way to come to this conference, and that's because we're used to people mirroring back to us. Yes, you're dressed appropriately. You didn't wear your bathing suit, or you didn't wear your bathrobe. And it's the same way with terrorism. People look externally to say, is this appropriate behavior? And nowadays, if you have a phone, you get social support very quickly. Back in the days of Al Qaeda training camps, you had to go to a camp and you could be arrested all along the way. You had to make face-to-face contact, and support was offered to you, but with a lot of risk. Nowadays, it's offered virtually, and virtual comes in a very intimate way, just like we're talking to each other right now. I'm sorry for the noise in the room, but you might feel that you're connected and that we're virtually in the same space. It's the same with terrorists. So very quickly, most people that start interacting with the group get surrounded by the group. They get love bombed by the group. They suddenly have lots of followers. They have people interacting with them, and all of them are telling them, you'd be a hero to do this act of terrorism. This is the correct thing. This is why it's correct. And they're teaching them the ideology. So then we have to go down to look at the level of the individual. So you see this systems way of looking at things. And on the individual level, it varies by if you're in a conflict zone or a non-conflict zone. If you're in a non-conflict zone, usually the vulnerabilities and motivations have to do with wanting belonging, wanting a sense of significance, pursuing a sense of dignity and purpose. In some cases, it's physical needs. This can be, especially in a conflict zone. A lot of people went to ISIS thinking, okay, I'm going to get a salary, I'm going to get a house, everything's going to be taken care of for me. It can also be wanting to escape your current situation. If it's a stressful situation for any reason, if a terrorist group is inviting you to travel and offering you a place, it's an escape. It can be for material needs that you join. It can be for criminal needs. There's at least 50 things that function as individual vulnerabilities and motivations. And if you're in a conflict zone, so like when we look at Hamas right now, it'll be really revenge driven, wanting the enemy to feel the same pain as they feel. that sort of thing. So lone wolves, I've already discussed a bit. Um, if you remember the Tsarnaev brothers, they were classified as lone wolves. Nobody actually directed them, but they were very much following the Al-Qaeda ideology. The elder Tsarnaev brother had gone over to the Caucasus. He had tried to join the Chechen terrorists. They were afraid he was a spy and didn't let him join, but he had imbibed of this whole thing of that there's um, uh, Western powers are the enemy of Muslims. So he came back to America with that in mind, and he downloaded the instructions of make a bomb in the kitchen of your mom and knew how to make a pressure cooker bomb and carried this out. We also have the Buffalo shooter, Peyton Gendron. Um, he's a lone wolf, but he was definitely reading the writings of other people on white supremacism. He was trying to outdo other shooters, like the New Zealand shooter. And he wrote in his manifesto to a virtual audience how he made his decisions, trying to really impress them, probably knowing that he might not be alive after he did his act. So he acted alone, but definitely in relationship to a group. So one of the things that we have to think about with terrorism as well is with the ideology that all of us have sacred values. We have things that are basically non-negotiable. So some people would never get an abortion. They would, no matter what stage it is in the pregnancy, they would see that as a human life. Al-Aqsa Mosque is sacred for many people, as is the Wailing Wall. Jerusalem is a sacred place for many religious people. Sexuality is sacred. So if you remember I think it was the movie The Indecent Proposal, where Robert Redford is proposing, how about one night with your wife? What would you make me pay for this? And that's a sacred value. So it's not something that you can buy. And most people would be very offended by that. And what we find with terrorism conflict is that when it involves sacred values, it can be really intractable conflicts. Another thing that we learned in our research is that with the ideology, not everyone joins because they have taken on the ideology in the first moments. Instead, like this guy, Breivik, who did the Norway bombing and the shooting at the camp, they take it on slowly in pieces. And especially, he's a lone wolf. But if you joined a group, and I'm going to show you a video of a young man that joined a group, it slowly, first the group makes you feel special because you belong. And in his case, we're going to watch Benji McDowell. In Benji McDowell's case, he's a white man that was learning disabled. And he went to a KKK cross burning and got euphoric from it and said he never felt such a sense of belonging in his life. And suddenly all these people were coming around him. And then they started directing him to read the book The Siege, the Turner Diaries, Mein Kampf, and all white supremacist literature until he was directed into hate. And that's what we found over and over again with our white supremacist interviews, that there was a process of being directed into hate, and that in the beginning you joined to meet your own needs. But as time went on, the group tries to fuse with you, or get you to fuse with the group and the ideology, and overtakes you. And then the group is using you for its needs. And if you don't go along with the hate, you're quickly ejected from the group. So people go along with it, even though it may or may not be important to them. And we call this process directed hate. Let's see. Nowadays, all the groups are online. Radicalization and recruitment is taking place virtually. And what terrorists say is that the people that speak to them online become father figures, become very important. In the case of ISIS, people got married virtually. So Kimberly Pullman from Canada told me that she was suicidal. She's dealing with a rape back in Canada. And she met a Tunisian guy online. Turned out he was actually, I'm not sure he was Tunisian. I think he was Somali. She met him online, and he started telling her, well, if this had happened to you here, the brothers would take care of that guy. And when we become a global caliphate, we will definitely punish people like that. We will regain your honor. And why aren't you coming over here, sister? You're a nurse. The Syrian kids need you. So sucking her in online. And as you hear, not ideologically, but by telling her she's important, her needs will be met. The skills she has are needed. And, slowly pulling her into things. And that's what happens over and over again these days. And because it's online, because people get swarmed and love bombed, it can happen really, really quickly. So we have to remember that as parents, our kids may be in the other bedrooms, but they may be spending time with the terrorists, and they may be spending more time with the terrorists than they are with us, because these people have time and they will relentlessly pursue, and they will talk and talk and talk, and they listen carefully as well, and they'll find out what your needs are. And so let's see. We also find that violent extremists go after military and veterans to join them. And that's because military members have access to training with weapons. They have access to hard targets for insider attacks. They often can increase discipline and structure within a group. They can provide group members with weapons and tactical training. So we found the Oath Keepers were bringing in special forces guys that didn't necessarily agree with the Oath Keepers ideology, but they were happy to come in and in some cases be paid to teach the members how to fight in case the U.S. government was going down, and the Oath Keepers had to protect the Constitution, is what their ideology claims. And of course, the people in the group thought this was great because it gave them a sense of hypermasculinity, purpose, dignity. And so when military is brought into a group, that the group suddenly gains legitimacy and an air of patriotism. And military members are really good for recruiting others. Same thing with police. And they're seen as that they can help in a future government takeover and or race war. And I should mention that with these groups that are active now are domestic violent terrorists, the anti-government militia movements, people that Trump called upon to go to the Capitol. They believe that we are in the US going to have a future civil war. And some of those that are in the military say, or military veterans say, well, there's going to come a point where we're going to have a war in the US, and military guys are going to have to decide they're going to take their kit and they're going to go home and they're going to join one side or the other. So it's not a joke that people think that it's going to come to this at this point. When you think about military and veterans, why do they want to join? If they're a vet, they may have lost a sense of belonging, purpose, and dignity. Oath Keepers was really good at recruiting former military, Patriot Front, same thing. They get a sense of personal significance and recognition. They feel that they're still pursuing a noble cause. They have a misguided sense of patriotism. And if they're racist, it fits. So, and for veterans, there's camaraderie. In some of these groups, the neo-Nazi groups have a rank structure. They like the discipline. And if they have post-traumatic stress, and it's a group like skinheads that are drinking and fighting all the time, it fits them for their post-traumatic stress state. Let's see. So I'd like to show you one of our videos, and then I'm going to open it to questions. So I hope that this will play. This is, I showed you a different one that I said I was going to. This is Ryan Lowry, who came back as a vet from the conflict in Iraq and couldn't find employment. And he had grown up racially integrated, but he became a white supremacist. So let's listen to Ryan, and then we'll go on to questions.
Seems to be muted.
Okay, let's see. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm trying to turn this off. Okay. So this is where you can reach me, and I'm always very happy to answer questions. I always say if I don't get an email, I mean, if I didn't answer you, I didn't get the email. But thank you for your attention. You can watch our videos on Escape Hate or our YouTube channel, and you can get all of our ratings on our website. So thank you very much, and I'm going to open it to questions now and hopefully stop the share. Yep, there we go. Okay.